Happening now on Grid Tonight. The NTT IndyCar Series is going through a crisis with a hybrid engine being delayed and concerns of Honda pulling out of the series. Is it time to hit the panic button? AJ Allmendinger is back in the Xfinity Series and has a brand new teammate in Supercars champion Shane Van Gisbergen. What can we expect from the two road course specialists next season? And the FIA investigation into Toto and Susie Wolff is over just as quickly as it began. Was it worth all the trouble? Hello, everyone watching here in the United States and around the world. Welcome to Grid Tonight, your weekly motorsports news program. I'm Ben Schneider in for Kobe Lambeth, and with me is Matt White from the Grid Endurance Performance Index. We encourage everyone to comment in the chat below, ask questions, consider supporting us through Super Chat or Buy Me a Coffee or through Patreon. Much more on that later at the end of the show, but for now, we've got a lot of news to get into tonight, so we'll take it away right now with our top story this evening. And like I mentioned in the intro, it involves the IndyCar Series. According to an article written by Marshall Pruitt from Racer.com, Honda has expressed a desire to leave the series after 2026 if costs continue to rise without a solution. Chuck Shifsky, American Honda Motorsports manager, told Racer that they have great concerns over the costs, and if Honda were to choose not to renew their engine deal with IndyCar, that would be the reason why. He mentioned IndyCar not having a third manufacturer, and there's a reason for that. It has to do with the cost. If the return on investment matched up with the investment, we would have a number of other manufacturers interested in being involved with the series. Link to this article is in the description box below. This comes on the heels of IndyCar announcing that they've postponed the debut of a new 2.2-liter twin turbocharged V6 engine with hybrid technology until after the 2024 running of the Indianapolis 500. Photo on your screen taken by Chris Jones from Penske Entertainment. And we'll bring Matt White back in here to talk about this first story. Good to see you, Matt. How shocking is this news, especially considering you just had IndyCar President Jay Fry say the partnership between Chevrolet and Honda has been phenomenal. He mentioned postponing the hybrid engine. Why would a phenomenal partner like Honda say publicly that they're willing to leave?
Well, good evening, Ben. Hello, everybody. Big news there. Well, a couple of sort of intertwining stories, I guess, in this whole IndyCar saga of the week. Let's talk about the postponement first of what we thought was coming at the beginning of the year and now been pushed back. And it immediately reminds me of what would have potentially happened down in Australia last year when supercars were going to split their season in half and bring the new car in halfway through. And then that was all pushed back due to delays and COVID and everything else that had rumbled through. So that was going to be a thing in supercars last year, where we were going to have basically two halves of a season with two sets of rules, basically, for what they were playing with. I mean, I was kind of looking forward to it. We've had some of the tests been going on already since the end of the season, and it was looking like, all the light was green for St. Pete at the end of February, beginning of March for the opening race. Now it's been pushed back to after the 500, straight into that really, normally massively busy period for IndyCar between the 500 and, of course, now we've got the Olympic break in the middle of that this year. So it's going to be a hugely intensive time for the teams. Throwing this new curveball of engine layout and technology and everything in there is just going to be probably a huge headache for everybody. But especially you have to think of the lesser funded, lower budget, smaller teams that are, just going to be given this box of kit and basically be told to get on with it. Which is, Penske running 3 cars, Ganassi running 5 cars. They've got huge resources and stuff, but it's the smaller teams I worry about. And if Honda also potentially waving the IndyCar white flag, then we're going to have no smaller teams and no second engine manufacturer to field in those smaller teams. It's worrying, isn't it, for IndyCar, which we'll get to shortly, has a massive opportunity to stop shooting itself in the foot against other single-seater championships around the world, and it keeps doing it to itself.
Well, Matt, to your point, Honda supplies more than half of the full-time IndyCar teams with engines. We know they've been looking for a third engine supplier for a long time. Once upon a time, we had rumors of Alfa Romeo coming in. That got people hopeful, but that hasn't worked out. And the recent article from motorsport.com suggests they're looking at the WEC after their F1 exit. We know people have been asking IndyCar to add more ovals. We just recently lost Texas, but we added Milwaukee. But having lost Texas, that's the only other race that was the only other race besides the 500 that was using the Super Speedway Aero kit. So that'll be a one-race deal next year. We've seen people talking about IndyCar marketing needing improvement. We haven't really seen any meaningful steps forward on that front. We were talking backstage. Some people still think the Indy 500 is a NASCAR race won with Formula One cars because they don't know what the IndyCar Series is. And recently, one of their young stars, Pato O'Ward, said the quiet part out loud. A lot of Americans have no idea what IndyCar is. That's a direct quote from Pato O'Ward in that Racer.com article. So is it reasonable for people to start questioning the leadership of this current IndyCar administration, specifically Roger Penske, and his ability to lead this series to a better place?
I mean, perhaps. I mean, there's been lots of things that have happened in the last little while. You talk about the calendar; it just kind of been a bit stagnant for ages. The market, we've spoken at length on this show about the poor marketing of the series in territories around the races, and then further afield nationally. The whole hubbub that's gone on with iRacing and the game that's now gone as well. That could have been a big push for the casual fan to get back involved with IndyCar, but that's now gone by the by, it seems, or at least potentially for the meantime. It's you look at Formula One, and we've had obviously the longest season ever, TM. The domination of Red Bull. They had their party at the Red Bull factory today, which, as I've always mentioned, is not a million miles away from where I'm sat right now. The whole the Vegas thing that we talked about on the show. IndyCar has got the chance to get in here and get some of these fans involved, and they're just not doing it. And it's a real shame because the last couple of years in the championship has been fantastic. Great racing, some really, really good stuff, and no one's seeing it. And it really should. They just do better, IndyCar, really.
Yeah, well, with the news from Honda, you have to wonder what the teams powered by Honda are thinking. Chip Ganassi Racing is a Honda team. Alex Palous won 2 of the last 3 titles in the series with Honda Power. Andretti Global, that's another Honda team potentially expanding over to Formula One with, ironically, strong support from General Motors and Cadillac branding, which also owns Chevrolet, Honda's only competition in the series. CART began its downfall once Penske, Ganassi, Toyota, and Honda left, leaving only Ford and smaller teams. So, Matt, I've got to ask the question. I know we were talking about it a little bit backstage as well, but is it an overreaction to be fearful that, at least in its current form, IndyCar may not survive until the end of a decade?
We massively hope not. The 500 will survive in some shape or form, won't it? Because, of course, it ran for so long, 100 years ago, without being part of the championship. But yeah, they just need some glimmer, the Kevin Harvick golden horseshoe to come along to IndyCar and give them a kick up the butt, really, because if they do lose Honda, then, as I said, use the quote that I mentioned when we were chatting about it before the show, IndyCar becomes American F2 that also goes on ovals with a single aero kit and a single engine supplier. Just another rung on the junior single-seater ladder that just happens to have a couple of high 30s and low 40-year-olds in it. It just needs. And we were all so excited when Roger Penske took it over. Here we go. Someone's got hold of this. That's in. It's not someone that's just picked it up as a business venture. There's skin in the game here. And I know we've had COVID and all those things. It just has not happened for IndyCar, relatively speaking, in the business side of things over the last couple of years. The on-track product is fantastic, but as I said before, if no one's watching it, then what can you do? And it just needs to kick up the bum.
Yeah, and that's the biggest tragedy in all of this, I think, is that the series does have phenomenal racing, fantastic racing. Even with Alex Palou being so dominant last year, I thought we had some great racing last season. It's just not as many people are watching it because you're not putting yourselves out there from the marketing standpoint, and you got all the behind-the-scenes turmoil that we're talking about here. I mean, again, I'm not saying I would put money on the IndyCar series not making it out of a decade, but at the same time, you have to look at all these things pooled together. And again, as I said backstage, to borrow phrase from Kyle Busch, everything is not so great over in IndyCar land at the moment. And it's real unfortunate because I was with you. I thought to myself, there's nobody more qualified. I still remember, and this is back in the days when I was doing the photo finish on Scout Radio 4 or 5 years ago at my college. That's how it doesn't feel like that long ago, but it's a pre-COVID sort of thing. Time's kind of stood still for the last several years. It feels like yesterday and a decade ago at the same time. But I said in that moment, I can't think of anybody more qualified to make this purchase than Roger Penske. And there was so much anticipation and so much excitement that here's some new blood coming into the ownership here, and they're going to, have a different perspective on things. And Roger certainly knows how to run his businesses. And it just, again, I know you had the unfortunate timing with COVID and everything, but it just has not worked out very well. And the series has really struggled to come out of that and rebound. And things, unfortunately, look like they're just getting worse here. And they seem to think that the solution to all this potentially is going down the NASCAR path of creating a charter system, because that's worked so well over in NASCAR, right? And we haven't had a single team close their doors since 2016, and we have all these open entries and full 40-car fields. Oh, wait a second, that's not the case, is it?
No. Again, just surrounding the pot here. And we're going to have this like for the 500, of course, where we have our extra entries and things. If you're not part of this club, you can't come in. A bit like we've been talking about with Formula One over the last 6 months with the Andretti story as well, to some degree. But again, the closed shop is just not what we need. Good evening, Joe. He says, I do think Roger and the team needs to have some hard discussions. Do they have the best team available to lead IndyCar? That's, again, I guess,
fair question.
A question that they need to ask themselves over this winter and into the new season.
Yeah, well, and then Joe, following up here as well, my concern is IndyCar could get bought up by someone like NASCAR or Disney, and NASCAR would be really interesting to consider that one. But a big firm, I think it's the general point Joe's trying to make, wanting to repeat what Liberty has done with Formula One. I'll tell you this, from a marketing standpoint, I think the Liberty era of F1 has been phenomenal. I think they have done so much more, exponentially more than what F1 did under the Bernie Ecclestone era, if you will, especially here in the United States. And the proof of that is impossible to deny. But, there's the concerns again, you're going down the entertainment road of wanting to do all these sprint races and wanting to expand the calendar out to the point where you're exhausting these teams. So it's kind of a, either or situation there. What exactly do you want from somebody like that buying the series? You're probably going to get some good things from a marketing standpoint and a brand standpoint, but from an on-track standpoint, it might not be what you're hoping for.
Yeah, to kind of expand on what I was mentioning about Formula One earlier, they captured the lightning in the bottle with the Netflix and the pandemic. Everyone was sat at home with nothing to watch. Yeah. Unfortunately, the cork is slightly coming out of that bottle now this season with Formula One, and they're trying to put it back in and make sure they don't lose it. Hi to Jackson, he says, please give me words of comfort that everything's going to be okay in IndyCar. We're trying, yeah. And, man, it's funny you say that, because I think that's true to an extent. But even still, I feel like I was starting to notice a shift even in 2019. Like, I think, obviously everybody being sat at home with nothing to watch and it being on the front page of Netflix really accelerated it. But I think even then, just before COVID, being on Netflix, having that platform and improving your marketing, improving your social media and everything, I think that alone, even before the pandemic started, went a long way in improving things. I mean, again, I'm talking specifically from a United States standpoint. You might be able to speak a little bit to if there's been an uptick over in Europe, where Formula One's always had a pretty big following. But again, I think even just as soon as Liberty got in, they really improved the marketing side of things. But again, Jackson saying we cannot have NASCAR buy out IndyCar or Liberty. I don't know that that's trying to find the right word here, but that's the right business model, so to speak, that you want to repeat, word for word exactly, so to speak. I don't know that that's what you want either. And finally, Adam Lemery is saying IndyCar needs more oval racing, head to places like Richmond and New Hampshire. Well, I could certainly get on board with New Hampshire now that I'm in the New England area. We're supposed to go back to Richmond in 2020. That didn't happen because of the pandemic, and that hasn't been brought back. But again, we'll bring it back to Penske here real quick, and then we'll move on. This has been a common theme, I think, of his administration, so to speak, that you have him coming out and saying, oh, yeah, well, we're working on a third engine supplier. We'd love to have more ovals on the schedule.
I don't think you can really use the pandemic excuse anymore. It's going to be 2024 here in just a few weeks. We've really come out of that, downtime that, things weren't quite so open and there were some restrictions. I mean, almost all of that is gone at this point. So we're at a stage now where I feel like, obviously you can't add tracks to the schedule overnight. And I love that Milwaukee's back, don't get me wrong, but I hate that it came at the expense of Texas. I hate that Richmond's not back on the schedule. I hate that the East Coast, really is kind of shut out of this series right now when you think of all the great racetracks. And it's not just ovals either. Why are we not going to Watkins Glen? Why are we not, looking at other cities, on the eastern side of the country where you could maybe do a street race like you did in Baltimore, like you wanted to do in Boston? I think there's some great opportunities there. But it's kind of been, my thing is, there's the country music song, a little less talk and a lot more action. That's kind of what I feel like the IndyCar series needs to do right now. We're hearing all this talk. Where's the action? Where's the actual, where are the actual changes being put into place so that we can see the evidence of your talk here? And I think that's really lacking at the moment.
Yeah, don't disagree. We'll have to wait and see how this story progresses over the next couple of weeks through the winter and into next season. Jackson,
one more question from Jackson here, and then we'll.
Yeah. Do we think we could see a uniform chassis engine formula between IndyCar and Super Formula, like what DTM and Super GT did for Class 1? I mean, anything is possible, but that's Honda being involved again. If they're going to pull out, then they'd be back. So who knows at this point? There was that Super GT DTM thing was rumbling on for about 3 or 4 years, and then they had the Dream Races, which was then ended up being won by someone that didn't compete in either series in the Rain Car Takei and winning in Fuji, which was funny. But yeah, who knows? That's another thing that's on IndyCar's to-do list, is to get a new car.
Yeah. And again, I brought this up on Roundtable this weekend as well. I know we've had different eras of aero kits and we've made tweaks here and there. We, added the aero screen. Obviously that changes things to an extent, but for all intents and purposes, the main chassis, the main car is still the same DW12 you introduced, in 2012, 12 years ago. So, I mean, there's been absolutely no, well, I shouldn't say that again because the aero kits, but there's been minimal development on that side of things as well. And,
somebody said, I can't remember who I was listening to on a podcast at some point this week, that said IndyCar is now a historic racing championship running to a contemporary championship with the 12-year-old car.
Yeah.
Which I thought was a great line.
Yeah, honestly. All right, and one more comment from Jackson here. I'm actually okay with the chassis since it keeps the entry list high. I'll shut up now. Well, we'll move on now. How about that? We'll make a deal with you there. Jackson, let's move on to the beginning of our silly season discussion. Boy, do we have a lot of that we'll get into later in our follow-ups, but we'll start with the biggest news today, and it involves a couple of drivers at Colleague Racing. We'll start with the move that's been expected for quite some time now. AJ Allmendinger is headed back to the Xfinity Series full-time in 2024 with Colleague Racing. Since joining Colleague in 2019, Allmendinger earned 2 consecutive Xfinity Series regular season titles, including 15 wins and 10 pole positions. During the 2023 season, he entered 5 Xfinity races, winning twice at COTA and Nashville, and scoring 4 top 5s and 5 top 10s and 3 poles in total. Imagine if he returns to the number 16 Chevrolet next year with that high level of performance all year long. He could be one of the drivers to beat. Now, Chris Rice, the president of Colleague Racing, said Allmendinger's return to Xfinity will give the organization the best chance to continue growing, graphic courtesy of the Colleague Racing team. Matt, do you agree with Chris Rice that AJ Allmendinger returning to Xfinity full-time along with a partial cup schedule is the best move for the team across the board?
I remember back to the beginning of last season when myself and Matthew Owens, who hopefully is watching again tonight, did a little preview show on the USRN YouTube channel, and we said, what a good year it's going to be for Colleague Racing. They're in the Cup Series. They've got their 2 guys in there. It just never really happened, did it, last year? AJ Allmendinger was on the record a couple of years ago saying he didn't want to go back to the Cup Series and do full-time again, and then ended up doing it. But now he's back, and he was in Xfinity full-time, and he was so good a couple of years ago. And as you mentioned, Ben, 2 regular season championships to his name. I feel like Xfinity, and we're going to get to more Xfinity stories shortly, but I feel the Xfinity Series is going to be really, really competitive next year. And with him back, it gives Colleague that boost that they needed, to try and win some more races, win some more trophies, and potentially go for the outright championship at the end of the year at Phoenix. So, he's part of the furniture there now. Is AJ, and he won't go anywhere else until he retires. So he's got maybe one or two more shots at finally getting himself a proper championship, not just the regular season one. And this is the best place for him to try and do it in the Xfinity Series.
Yeah, well, I always have to say this disclaimer, every time we talk about Allmendinger, I don't actively root for the guy anymore because I don't feel like with the position I have, not just here at Grid, but also with Brock Beard and LastCar.info, I can't really pull for favorites with the role that I play in media. But anybody that's known me long enough knows that I grew up an AJ Allmendinger fan. So I would like to think I'm qualified to tell you about this guy's career from since he came into NASCAR with Red Bull Racing and going through the highs and the lows with Petty and Penske and then JTG Doherty. And I'll tell you, for a guy that has so much energy and can get so excited and get so emotional, we saw the evidence of that when he won the Roval this year. I never thought I'd see him get as burnt out and exhausted as he got towards the end of his stint with JTG. Like 2017, 2018, I mean, he was not running well. It was not fun. It was a grind, and it really burned him out. And it burned him out to the point where he stepped away. He said, I'm going to do the Rolex 24, and then I'm going to go into the TV booth for NBC. I'm going to be on NASCAR America. I'm going to go play golf on the weekends. Like his career, for all intents and purposes, was almost essentially over, aside from doing a couple races here and there. And then Matt Colleague and Chris Rice come calling, and he does some road course races. He gets them a win at the Roval in 2019, and expands his schedule in 2020, goes full time in 21 and 22, and wins a couple regular season titles, and is in the running for a couple of championships. And his inability to make the championship four in 2022, it's on par with Kevin Harvick in 2020. I feel like we don't talk about it as often because it's Xfinity and not Cup, but he only had 5 races where he wasn't in the top 10 all year. The last time he was full-time in the series. The only problem was 2 of those 5 races came in the round of 8, the worst possible time. And, he didn't have enough of a buffer to get him into the championship 4. But, make no mistake, if last year was any indication, the 5 races that he ran, if his 2 full-time seasons with Colleague before that are any indication, he's going to be a championship contender next year. And I, have to tell you, I think that this is the best place for him at this point in his career. I understand why they wanted to bring him full-time into Cup to see how he could do, because he was running very well in his partial schedule for them in 2022, almost won a race at Coda, won a race this year, the Charlotte Roval. But again, at this point in his career, being in his early 40s, he clearly was having so much fun in the Xfinity Series. And again, he reminded me of 17 and 18 with JTG. Kind of felt like he was getting burnt out. He wasn't having a lot of fun racing on Sundays full time and being on that 38-week grind nonstop with only one off weekend. And it's funny. I still think back to what his wife Tara put on her Instagram story the day that deal was announced. He was joking and saying, "Oh, I can already tell I've made a mistake. I don't want to do this, being only having 1 week off." So I think that this is going to really re-energize him, and the ability to fight for a championship again is something that's really going to work out, not just for him, but for Colleague as a whole. I think that, I know he said, I will do whatever, Matt Colleague and Chris Rice want me to do, but I think that this is the best decision that they could make for their program as well. Put him in the Cup car on the road courses where, he's going to be a threat to win, and let him focus on Xfinity full time. That I think is going to work out very well for them next season.
Yeah. Don't disagree with anything you've said.
Yeah. And well, as Adam Lemery brings up as well now, AJ and SVG as teammates, that's going to be awesome. Those two will be battling on road courses. So let's get into the second part of this announcement. This one, maybe not as expected, but we have it here for you right now anyway. The team announced earlier today a partnership with Trackhouse that will allow Shane Van Gisbergen to run alongside Allmendinger full-time in the series, and they even gave him his personalized number 97 car for Colleague Racing. He will also run 7 Cup Series races as part of his 2024 schedule. That's Coda, both Talladega races, the Coca-Cola 600 Charlotte, the street race at Chicago, Watkins Glen, and the fall race at Las Vegas. So, Matt, what can we expect from SVG in 2024 as he continues to get acclimated to the NASCAR world?
Well, to your point about being a legacy AJ Allmendinger fan, I will wave the SVG flag on this show, as people will know. I was waiting with bated breath for this news to come out, and I was shocked to see that he's going to get a full run for the championship in Xfinity. I thought it would be a mishmash job of some ARCA, some truck, the Cup races. We kind of knew where he would run, relatively speaking, in the Cup Series, and there it is on screen there. And then, yeah, full Xfinity Series. Wowee. The first two races, he's going to get a Daytona and then Atlanta. That's going to be eye-opening. But, well, this guy's come. He turned up at Chicago and won last year. He got a top 10 at Indianapolis. He finished on the lead lap in his Truck Series debut at IRP. He came from the back of the grid in the New Zealand Grand Prix a couple of years ago, the Toyota Racing Series, from, I think, it was a pit lane start, and ended up winning. He's been on the podium in WRC2. He's not a rally driver. Anything he turns his hand to just turns to gold. So surely he'll get a win or two. There's plenty of Xfinity, road course races, of course, especially in that early part of the season. COTA as well in there, with Sonoma, Portland, of course, where hopefully our man Joe can get down there and get him in front of a camera for us. That'd be cool. Chicago, he obviously goes there with track experience and a win. So very excited for this. He's got his number, which is cool as well. But Talladega in the Cup race, those kind of things are going to be eyes on stalks stuff for him. They'll be completely out of his comfort zone for a couple of runs on those big super speedways. But I do feel like places like Martinsville, Iowa, well, they don't go to Iowa anymore. I was going to say Iowa, but they don't go to Iowa, of course, anymore. Places of that sort of ilk, Richmond, you'd think he'd be fairly on the pace. It's not like he's in dud equipment.
Yeah, one correction real quick. He was one lap down in the Truck Series start.
Sorry.
I think he said lead lap, but that's all right. But he was on the lead lap for much of the night. You're right. I mean, he definitely performed very, very well. And again, I don't think, well, first of all, I don't think you could have expected him to go out and win Chicago. But you can't say you're shocked that he did what he did because of how great he is in the Supercar Series, of course. But I think he ran very well, doing something completely different, running, going from a street race in Chicago to, short track and IRP in a truck, for crying out loud. I think that he adapted very, very well to that. And, I have no doubt that he'll continue to do so in Xfinity, certainly on the road courses. And we'll get into that here and that discussion in just a moment, because we know how good Allmendinger is on road courses as well. Adam Lemery saying SVG at Dega, that's going to be incredible. Certainly going to be entertaining to watch that. Good to see Matthew Owens in the chat. Welcome, Matthew. Low-key disappointed with the SVG truck, or a Cup schedule rather, if the goal is to get him ready for full-time Cup in, I believe it means 25, then I think he needs to be on more oval experience with the next gen car. Matt, what do you think of that?
Yeah, and Matthew made that point in our chat this afternoon as well. And he brought up the point of Chase Elliott when he came in and he ran at Darlington and he ran at Martinsville and then came in full time. What has he got? Vegas and the super speedways. It was a bit of an odd choice. I would have liked to have seen him at maybe Darlington, maybe Kansas. Oh, he's doing the Dakota 600 as well, of course.
Yeah.
But maybe another mile and a half, and maybe a short track in the Cup Series, maybe like a Bristol or a Martinsville in there would have been nice. But he's going to get plenty of seat time, much more, and that's one of the reasons he's coming across, is because there's so many more opportunities to race rather than just 12 weekends a year, which he would have been getting in Australia.
Yeah, well, and I'll say this. I know that, that we're still trying to figure out, there were some conflicting reports today. Will these Cup starts all be with Colleague? Will they be with, an extra Trackhouse car like the Project 91 car, for example? Will they be a mix of both? I'll tell you this, Colleague's team motto is trophy hunting. So if they're part of this deal as well, maybe they're thinking, let's get him some oval experience, but let's also make sure we get him on a handful of road courses where we know he could be a threat to do what he did Chicago, and ran very well at IMS in his second start there as well. So it'll be interesting to see how he performs. But going full time, to your point, Matt, as well, that was a bit of a surprise to me. I thought it would kind of be a mix across everything, and I do think there might be some Truck Series starts with Nice, or maybe he'll run. I mean, people are saying, does he have to run the ARCA race at Daytona to be qualified to run, on these super speedways and everything. I don't know exactly how that's going to work out, but I think there will be a mixture even beyond what was just announced today to get him as much experience as possible. But, on that note, let's talk about him. Let's talk about Allmendinger being teammates now. Do you think Kaulig has a chance to run the table and sweep the Xfinity Series road course races next season, considering who's going to be in two of their cars full time?
Absolutely high chance that can happen. But there's also a high chance that they'll end up running into each other at somewhere like Glen or Sonoma or somewhere. You can imagine them both going for the win at Sonoma and ended up in the tyre barrier at the last corner at the hairpin. So I don't know. Highly likely, he'll learn a lot from AJ. I feel like in terms of how to set the cars up on the road courses and stuff like that. Because of course he's not been in an Xfinity car yet so far. So it's going to be interesting to see how they get on. Matthew again says, I'd like to see him as short track in Darlington in place of two road courses. But as you mentioned, Ben, Kaulig likes trophy hunting. If that's the goal, just winning, then yeah, it's absolutely perfect. As I said, and Adam made the point before with his comment, just random and bizarre to see him at Talladega in the Cup race. For instance, he's obviously on the Xfinity. He's going to run the Xfinity races there as well. But it's going to be he's going to be hanging out the back, trying not to lose the draft. I feel like.
I remember when Jacques Villeneuve came over to run a handful of starts with Bill Davis Racing, and I think Toyota really struggled in Cup their first year in 2007, so they put all their cars in qualifying trim, so that they could run the top speed possible. And Michael Waltrip won the pole for the fall race, I think, and I think Villeneuve qualified sixth, and he was being interviewed on ESPN's pre-race studio show before the race, and he mentioned, just completely on his own before the race, we'll drop to the back of the pack because we don't need to be starting in row 3 with absolutely no experience during the chase for the Cup and messing anything like that up. So I'm sure SVG, is going to be reasonable and sensible and not try to make any bold or brash moves there to mess anybody's race up. And he's going to use it as a learning experience. And again, Matthew's saying, maybe the goal is full-time Cup in 25. We'll see how he does this year in Xfinity. And if he goes out and he's going to be eligible for a championship, I don't know if he's going to be able to win it with his lack of oval experience, but you never know with how many road courses there are these days, how many playoff points could he rack up? He's going to be in the mix for that, I think. So we'll see how he does. And one more comment from Joe here. I was thinking the same, Matt. Portland is where AJ won when we were out there in 2022. So maybe SVG and AJ for the front row there. That's going to be interesting. How are the commentators going to, you're talking about Kaulig racing back and forth. You're going to have to say Allmendinger and Van Gisbergen so much this season. That's going to be quite a mouthful. I think they might just go with AJ and SVG or something like that.
Good luck to Adam Alexander and Rick Allen through the year on trying not to combobulate those two while they're battling out for a victory. One thing that sprung to mind for me was back to 2015 when SVG came over and did the Rolex 24 with a car that had a WeatherTech down the side of it, and he got on the podium that day in a Porsche. So he has WeatherTech, already part of his American history back, 7 or 8 years ago now. So the car looks cool. I just want to see some merch, please.
Yeah, I think I saw a tweet from Bozy shortly before we came on the show that they were running team cars in one of the GT classes in 2020, I believe, as well. So, kind of interesting to see how things have come full circle for them. One more comment from Matthew, and then we'll move on here. Flashing back to that Talladega race in 2007. The front row was Michael Waltrip and Dave Blaney. Dave Blaney finished third that day as well. Most of the other Toyotas weren't so fortunate, but Joe Nemechek, John Andretti, and Jacques Villeneuve all up there in that top 10 as well. Certainly a wild starting grid to go back and look at that day. All right, we move on now to our third story and update from last week's show. Susie Wolf and her husband Toto were under investigation from the FIA for a potential conflict of interest. The investigation has already been dropped after a massive backlash. The photo on your screen is courtesy of F1 Academy. Now, Kobe and Matt, I know you guys were very critical last week of the FIA's decision to investigate the Wolves based on mere allegations from a media outlet that didn't already have the best reputation when it comes to credibility. Now, Lewis Hamilton was also very upset over this situation, especially the FIA's treatment of Susie, and he was echoing the thoughts shared by many. He released this quote as well. A disappointing week, really, to see that the governing body of our sport has sought to question the integrity of one of the most incredible female leaders we've ever had in our sport with Susie Wolf, without questioning and without any evidence, and then just saying sorry at the end, and that's just unacceptable. Now, Susie herself also released a statement saying, when I saw the statement issued by the FIA yesterday evening, my first reaction was, is that it? For 2 days, insinuations have been made about my integrity in public and through background briefings, but nobody from the FIA has spoken to me directly. I might have been collateral damage in an unsuccessful attack on somebody else, or the target of a failed attempt to discredit me personally, but I have worked too hard to have my reputation called into question by an unfounded press release. We've come a long way as a sport. I was extremely thankful for the unified support of the Formula One teams. I have worked with so many passionate women and men at F1 and the FIA who have the very best interests of our sport at heart. However, this episode has so far taken place without transparency or accountability. I've received online abuse about my work and my family. I will not allow myself to be intimidated and intend to follow up until I have found out who has instigated this campaign and misled the media. What happened this week is simply not good enough. As a sport, we must demand and we deserve better. So, Matt, did the FIA drop this quote-unquote investigation due to backlash from the public? And do you believe the FIA has learned its lesson about jumping the gun without any evidence to prove wrongdoing?
I mean, yeah, we talked about this obviously on the show last week, myself, Kobe, and Alex, because it was just about bubbling under and just come out last Wednesday. And then I think I may have said during the show last week, oh, don't worry, this will all be gone away by the weekend because it's clearly nonsense. And I was almost proved exactly right, because by the weekend it was all gone away. As soon as the F1 teams all fell in line and produced those copy and paste statements that everyone put out on, I think that was the Wednesday of last week, you knew something was up. And a non-creditable source fishing for stories or fishing for something. I hope they've got some good lawyers, because they may end up needing them down the track here, because Toto and Susie and Mercedes as a team will not stand for what's gone on. There was also some, let's pick my word nicely here, misdirection, let's say, from our FIA president last week, because it was the FIA gala and a prize giving ceremony in Baku on Saturday, where all of a sudden he wasn't there because he'd fallen over and got concussed or something, and then he was there, and it was just the FIA. What a week for them! A complete and utter shambles and mess that they've got themselves into, which they could have just not, just let it be, and none of us would have had to really get involved and know about this if they just either quashed it straight away or just not stuck their foot in and got involved. As I said last week, the F1 season's been so long, and now we have to deal with this on top of it. Just another bad part of what has been a tumultuous Formula One season for many reasons, and really disappointed on the way that this has all come up and then gone straight away again without anybody, not even a sorry and a proper real apology in terms of publicly from the FIA.
Yeah, Matt, I watched last week's show, and I think I said in the chat, quoting something you said, I think it was something like, I'm sick of Formula One at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think, you're speaking for a lot of people there. It was not a great season from an entertainment standpoint. I suppose it was, season almost couldn't have been better. I guess it could have been better if they'd won Singapore and gotten the perfect season. But if you're a Red Bull fan, I'm sure you love the 2023 season. If you're a Max Verstappen fan, I'm sure you couldn't get enough of what you saw this year. But for those of us that are neutral fans or fans of other teams, we want to see some parity. We want to see some competition, and we just didn't get that this year. And with how long the calendar's gotten, it just felt like it dragged on, and the same guy wins 17 of the last 18 races, and then the season ends, everybody's ready for a break, and then you have something like this. So it's unfortunate that we haven't been able to enjoy what little off season we have nowadays, with how massive the calendar is going to be again next year with, they say, 24 races. We'll see if all of them end up actually happening. I feel like the last several years we've had to drop a race or two here or there for whatever reason, but they seem committed to the largest calendar ever. I think a lot of people are going to get burned out, and having to deal with stuff like this in the off season. I mean, I imagine it's been an incredibly stressful week, a couple of weeks now for the Wolff family. And they certainly didn't need this stress, as they're trying to recover and get ready for what's going to be the longest year in Formula One history.
Yeah, it's a real shame that this has had to happen just before Christmas as well. And it was get through Abu Dhabi, prize giving, and then have a couple of weeks off for everybody really until the new year before testing ramped up again in February, and then they had to deal with all of this basically nonsense.
Yeah. All right. We'll leave it there. Matt, I'm going to turn it back over to you now. I believe we have another update over on the Grid EPI side of things. So take it away.
We do. The final update of the year for the Grid Endurance Performance Index, 152 races in the books for 2023. The final two happened at the weekend, and they both happened in the Gulf. One was Sunday, one was Saturday. My memory's all over the place this week. On Saturday in Kuwait, we had their 12-hour race, the final race of the Creventic Series, won after 12 hours by less than 1 second by CP Racing. Shane Lewis, Joe Foster, Charles Espenlaub, and Charles Putman winning for Mercedes. So congratulations to those guys. That's their third victory of the season. And in Abu Dhabi, the Golf 12 Hours was on Sunday, and that was won by Mercedes. Lucas Stoltz, Mika Grenier, and Maro Engel winning the final grid ranking / grid EPI race of 2023. Jules Gounon picking up the Intercontinental GT Drivers' Championship in that race. So here is the standings as it finishes up then for 2023. Our provisional champions are now our champions. Sebastian Buemi and Ryo Hirakawa, part of the World Championship winning Toyota squad in the World Endurance Championship. They are our dual champions of 2023, just beating out their teammate Brendan Hartley. Nürburgring 24-hour winner Felipe Laze is fourth ahead of more Toyota drivers, Kamui Kobayashi and Mike Conway, fifth and sixth. Marino Sato from the European Le Mans Series, seventh, and Helio Castro Neves, eighth, as part of his program with Mike Shank Racing in the IMSA endurance races. Antonio Garcia and Jordan Taylor, the teammates, rounding out the top 10 for Corvette Racing from GTD Pro. There is the top 50 as it finishes up for the season. A couple of bits and pieces being shuffled around last week after those two races. A couple of little key stats from the season for you, from the 152 races that were scored in the Grid Endurance Performance Index. Lucas Stoltz, the winner or one of the winners, as I mentioned, from the Golf 12 Hours at the weekend. He was the highest starter. He started 44 races of the 152 scored. He got a final score of 7.4, and it was 138th in the standings. Our top female racer was friend of the network, Samantha Tan. She finished 383rd with a score of 3.64. Raffaele Marcello was the top winner in terms of race wins. He just failed to get into the top 50, though. He's 51st, just falling off the graphic that you can see on screen. And Jules Gounon got the most podiums, 14 podiums for him, and he finished 59th on the year. 842 people were eligible to score points in the Grid Endurance Performance Index of 2023. And it's not too long before it all kicks off again with the Dubai 12 Hours on the second weekend of January. So the spreadsheet gets a rest for a little while, and then it'll be back in January and all through the year next year, when we'll do it all again to see who will be crowned the 2024 Grid Endurance Performance Index champion. Now it's back to Ben for the rest of this week's many headlines.
Yeah, many headlines indeed, including a lot that broke a few hours before we came on the air here. So bear with me. There's a lot to go over. We don't have graphics for everybody because, again, like I said, a lot of this news literally broke within an hour of us going on the air or earlier this afternoon. But we'll do our best to run you through some more motorsports news from around the world as quickly as we can here. A very busy few days with NASCAR silly season news in particular. So let's take you through the highlights right now. And we'll start with GMS Racing having shut down in 2023 at the end of the year. Let's start with Grant Enfinger. He will continue in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series next year with CR7 Motorsports. Enfinger will drive a number 9 Chevrolet full-time with Champion Power Equipment and Grant County Mulch serving as the primary sponsors. And in an effort to make this program more competitive, CR7 has formed a technical alliance with McAnally Hilgeman Racing. Getting support from Chevrolet and MHR is one thing, but they've also added former championship-winning crew chief Michael Shelton, who has been named general manager of the team. Now, Enfinger will also be reunited with Jeff Stankiewicz, who will be his crew chief for the 2024 season. That pairing won the 2015 ARCA Menard Series title together. The graphic on your screen is courtesy of the team CR7 Motorsports. Thad Moffitt will be making his return to NASCAR racing. The grandson of Hall of Famer Richard Petty will compete full-time in the Truck Series in 2024. He is joining a new team called Faction 46, co-owned by Lane and Logan Moore of Grove, Oklahoma. And Moffitt will be in the number 46 Chevrolet Silverado. The team has a technical alliance with Nice Motorsports. Moffitt is a past champion of the Southeast Limited Late Model Series and has a handful of starts in the ARCA Menard Series. He spent the 2023 season competing in the Trans Am TA2 Series to improve his road course racing skills, and now feels ready to step back into the Truck Series after making a few starts in 2022. Graphic on your screen courtesy of Faction 46. Joe Gibbs Racing confirmed their Xfinity Series driver lineup earlier this morning as Sheldon Creed and Chandler Smith will be their full-time drivers in 2024, with Creed in the number 18 Toyota and Smith alongside in the number 81. The 20 car will return as well, with John Hunter Nemechek returning for a handful of races and splitting the seat with Cup Series veteran Eric Almirola. That 2007 Milwaukee Xfinity Series storyline comes full circle now as he gets back in the number 20 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. And finally, the number 19 car will see some familiar faces behind the wheel, with Ryan Truex and Joe Graff Jr. returning to the seat. They will be joined by Taylor Gray and William Sawalich. Also announced this afternoon, Noah Gragson makes his return to the NASCAR Cup Series as Stewart-Haas Racing confirmed the rumors that he would take over the number 10 car that Almirola is departing. Now, Gragson spent roughly the first two-thirds of the 2023 Cup season with Legacy Motor Club before his suspension and eventual release from his contract with the team per his request. And per the team's announcement today, this is a multi-year deal. ThorSport Racing confirmed their driver lineup today as well, mostly keeping the same lineup that they had in 2023. Matt Kraft and Ty Majeski and Ben Rhodes all returned to the numbers 88, 98, 98, and 99 respectively, while Jake Garcia moves from McAnally Hilgeman Racing to replace Haley Deegan in the number 13 truck. And Connor Jones will also return to the team's number 66 on a part-time schedule, just as he ran last season. Moving on to some Formula 2 news, with 2023 champion of that series, Teo Porcher, is heading to Super Formula in 2024. Porcher will drive a number 19 Toyota for Ichu Inex Team Impul. He'll be teammates with Yuji Kunuimoto. The most recent F2 champion hopes to claim the title in Japan and wait for an F1 opportunity to open up in 2025. Porcher follows in the footsteps of Pierre Gasly and Liam Lawson. Both drivers nearly walked away with the Super Formula titles after moving to Japan after finishing up their Formula 2 careers. The 20-year-old Frenchman surely hopes he'll be able to break through and do what those two weren't able to do, and that's become a Super Formula champion. The photo on your screen, courtesy of Formula 2. And finally tonight, after losing his IndyCar seat late in the silly season process, Callum Ilott has found a new home for 2024 in sports car racing. Ilott will join Joda Sport next year in the FIA World Endurance Championship, driving the number 12 Porsche 963. He'll share the seat in the hypercar class with Will Stevens and Norman Nato. In 2021, before focusing on IndyCar, Ilott ran a full season in GT World Challenge Europe, driving a Ferrari for the Iron Lynx. According to Nathan Brown from the Indy Star, he expects we'll still see Ilott continuing to have a presence in the IndyCar paddock and believes he could be at the top of the list for substitute drivers if teams need to fill in throughout the year. And the graphic on your screen is courtesy of Joda Sport. So we'll bring Matt back in here. I'll ask you a question on this follow-up since we don't have any races to pick a winner for, any hots or nots tonight. Do you see this hypercar seat as a place to keep Ilott fresh behind the wheel before he maybe returns to IndyCar full-time in 25, or could this end up becoming a new permanent home in the next chapter of his racing career?
Got two other little stories that I'd like to just throw in before we go on.
Sure,
a massive no, but I'll answer your question first. One of those stories actually broke just as we hit the button to go on the air. But Ilott, good news that he's got a proper seat there in WEC. I think he'll be strong in that team. Jota were very good at times last year, especially at Le Mans. I had a chance to win before, or were in the sort of contention into the night before the FEA crashed in the Porsche curves. So a lot of shuffling around going on there. Ilott's too good. We talked about it at the time when he was gone from Juncos a few weeks back. Too good to be sat out on the sidelines for an IndyCar seat. And we saw last year a couple of people getting themselves hurt and bumped about. Simon Pagenaud springs to mind missed half the season. So if Ilott can get himself positioned to get himself in there as a reserve driver, then he's got the best possible opportunity to get himself back in as a full-time seat in 25.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a shame that Ilott's not going to be on the IndyCar grid next year, but I'm glad he does have something to keep him occupied for 24. And if that goes well enough, maybe he decides he likes it there. He's got a opportunity to stay and make a new career out of this, or maybe an IndyCar team comes calling and he finds his way back into the series in 25 and beyond. But before we go into the closing, Matt, I understand you said you had a couple more pieces of news that you wanted to talk about real quick.
Two little bits of news that we should bring you. One of them is Bathurst 12-hour related. It was announced yesterday, Australian time, that Craig Lowndes will be back at the mountain, the mountain legend, but he'll be teaming up with Cameron Waters and Thomas Randall for Scott Taylor Motorsport for the Bathurst 12-hour. So an all Aussie lineup for that team. That'll be something to watch. They'll be driving a Mercedes down there at the 12-hour. And just as we went on the air, because we haven't talked about Andretti tonight, we always talk about Andretti. They're part of this story. Walkinshaw Andretti United have just announced that it will field Toyota GT86 runner-up from this year, Campbell Logan, in the 2024 Dunlop Super 2 Series, and he will be the teammate to Zach Bates in that team next year.
All right, lots to look forward to, and we'll catch up on the chat here. Good to see Kobe. Hope you're doing well, my friend, and you're welcome. Happy to do it. Thanks for stepping up during my absence. Well, I know you guys stepped up when I had to take some time off a couple months ago as well, so happy to return the favor for you tonight. Joe Samiego saying loss for IndyCar, win for sports car. I think that says it all right there. And again, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens with Ilott, in 2024 and beyond, and where his career goes from here. And Matthew Owen saying, very disappointed to see and hear the Noah Gragson news. Feels like a big slap in the face to Cole Custer. Well, Matthew, I want to bring this point up because, again, Matt and I were talking about this a little bit backstage. There's a part of me that wonders, if you're Cole Custer and you think about what your experience was in the Cup Series 2 or 3 years ago, you look past getting the win in Kentucky, Custer really struggled when he was in that 41 car. And then he goes back down to Xfinity and he wins a championship. If you're Cole Custer at this point, do you look at where Stewart-Haas Racing's Cup Series program has been and think to yourself, I just won a championship. I might have a chance to defend my championship again. That sounds like a lot more fun than going and running between 20th and 25th in a Cup car with a program that, again, Matt and I were talking backstage. There's one Cup win among those 4 drivers. It was Chase Briscoe at Phoenix in 2022. So, with Kevin Harvick stepping away, that is a massive void that's going to be left in that team that was already on the back foot for much of last year. I can't help but wonder if, it might be a blessing in disguise that Custer hasn't been promoted back to the Cup Series, at least not right now. He's still on the younger side. I think has a lot of potential to get back there eventually. But as for right now, if I were in his shoes, I got to tell you, I wouldn't be complaining too much about, trying to run it back, so to speak, in 24. Yeah. So, Matt, I don't know if you want to comment on that as well, because I know we were.
I agree. Yeah, kind of agree. We talked about it before we went on the air. I think, as I said before, Xfinity is looking very tasty this coming year. Lots of people in there that can win races and run for a championship. And I think I'd probably be the same if I was Cole Custer. Try and defend your title against a massively competitive field, or run in a team which has been pretty much MIA for 2 years in the Cup Series, in, as you said, the 20s and teens. Chase Briscoe has got a massive job on his hands leading that team, as he's probably going to end up being the lead driver in the 14 car for next year. He's got a big job on his hands leading that 4-car team.
Yeah, well, I guess Josh Berry's going to be the oldest, but he's got some Cup Series experience filling in. But his career path was very unorthodox compared to what most drivers do these days. To be in your early to mid 30s and a Cup Series rookie is not something we see very often anymore. So in terms of Cup experience, he is going to be a rookie. And Noah Gragson only having really a year and a half. He did some partial racing in 2022, but a year and a half's worth of starts, I should say, with everything pulled together. And then Ryan Preece. I guess Preece might be the most experienced in terms of starts because he had a few years with JTG Doherty. But again, no disrespect to that team. It's not really top level equipment. Then again, maybe Storehouse Racing wasn't top level equipment last year. So I think it could be a rough couple of years for that team. They're certainly in a rebuilding era. But again, what does it say about their trust in Gragson that they wanted him badly enough that they didn't promote Custer after winning an Xfinity championship, after how long Custer has been in the Haas family with, the position his father is in as well. And, you got to think that would be a direct line and the obvious choice to fill in that 10 car, especially with Almirola and Smithfield going away. But, they must either really want Gragson badly or Gregson's bringing in an equal amount of money. Maybe it's a combination of both, but either way, I do agree that it's probably going to be a rough couple of years for SHR in the not too distant future. And that is going to be, sorry, Matt, do you have?
No, I was just nodding in agreement.
There we go. All right. Thank you so much. That's going to be our show for this evening. Thank you for tuning in. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. Thank you so much for helping us as we continue to climb up on the road to 1,000 subscribers. We're now in the 770 range. Help us get to 800 on the road to 1,000 and beyond. And don't forget to hit the bell icon to be notified every time we host a new show or upload a new video. And make sure you're also following us on all of our social media platforms and visit our website, gridranking.com. If you really liked what you saw tonight, you can take a few minutes after the show to consider investing in Grid Network through Patreon. You can join Colin Deschelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew in investing each month in the Grid Network. We encourage you to join this amazing group of people who help keep us on the air. And once we hit $500 per month, we can start sending our team to the track to be on site on a more regular basis, covering more races and continuing to expand our coverage for you, the viewers. The link to that is in the description box below, as it is to buy me a coffee. If you'd rather make a one-time donation instead, there's that option. Get your name on the board. Consider buying a specific on-air personality a cup of coffee. We'll thank you on the air. And you can also donate through our live streams through Super Chat if you're watching on YouTube, or through Super Thanks if you're watching after the fact as well. For Matt White from Grid Endurance Performance Index, I'm Ben Schneider from Grid Live Encore and LastCar.info. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you next time right here on the Grid Network.
Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.